We'd like to give a big thank you to our sponsor, Northwestern Mutual, Eves Financial Group. Hey Augusta, this is Abby Meefeld with Chronicle Media at AugustaChronicle.com. Thanks for joining us today. We're hanging out with Shauna Lloyd, who's going to be showing us how to make collard greens. She learned this recipe from her mother, and it's actually the perfect timing for us since the New Year's quickly approaching. As many of you may know, at New Year's you're supposed to eat collard greens, black-eyed peas, and cornbread for good luck. The collard greens, for every bite that you have, it's supposed to be the equivalent of $1,000. So I'm going to be eating a lot of these collard greens today. I'm really excited. Hope you guys enjoy this show. I'm going to go in and meet Shauna. All right, so I'm here in the kitchen with Shauna. Thank you so much for having us today, Shauna. It's so good to see you. Tell us a little bit about what you're going to be doing today.
Well, I'm getting ready to cook collard greens, and if you want to learn how to cook collard greens, you come at a great time.
Yay!
First of all, this is a recipe that my mother shared with me, and they make absolutely delicious collard greens. So if you're ready to learn, I can show you a little bit of what we do when we cook collard greens in the South.
Oh yeah, I'm excited to learn. Look how huge that is.
Yes, and usually the bunches come in big bunches. I've already clipped some of the leaves off of them, but usually the bunches are huge, and and when you cook them, you're going to find out how much you really end up with collard greens, because they do cook down.
Well, good. Well, we need a lot of them because, you know, you make $1,000 every bite. I mean, we need to eat a lot of those, so.
Well, I'm getting ready to break them off the leaves right now, so.
All right, perfect. So, well, let's get moving then.
Collard greens are one of my favorites because it's nutritionally really well for you, and not hard to cook at all. What I normally do is I go ahead and get the leaves, and the leaves are usually pretty big. I get the leaves and I stack the leaves as I'm doing here. And what you're going to do is you're going to stack the leaves and you're going to eventually roll them. But I'm going to go ahead and break up all the leaves off the bunch. Now, right now, the bunch I got here came from a local grocery store, but oftentimes you can find collard greens where people are selling them on the side of the road. Just make sure that when you get them that they're decently clean, because you don't want to bring collard greens home that's going to take you all day long to wash. And you don't have to do it really carefully. You just get the little stems and you break them off. This way you stack them on top of the bunch, and you keep doing that until you have all the collard greens removed from the bunch. And it doesn't matter whether you put the big ones on top or the little ones on top. And in the end, they're all going to go into the bunch and be shredded up, so it really doesn't matter exactly how you put them on there. Now, if you notice right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a stack of these collard greens and I'm going to put them together, and I'm going to put a big leaf on the top right here. I'm going to set these right here aside, and I'm going to get the collard greens and I'm going to roll them. You notice I got it rolled in a tight bunch right here. And then I'm going to get a knife, and I'm going to hold it on the cutting board, and I'm going to use that knife and I'm going to slice these collard greens. So you're going to continue to slice the greens into little small pieces like this. But if you notice what it makes it look like, it almost looks kind of like coleslaw when you finish cutting it down. It's real small shreds. It's not big leaves. And that's one of the ways that we cook collard greens in the South. We don't like to have big leaves. We like to have it down into little tiny shredded pieces, because you can really taste the flavor of those collard greens when they're shredded down like this. And you're going to have pieces like this. You don't want to use these stems right here because that will be kind of bitter to the taste with your greens. So normally what I do is I get them and I tear that off of the stems, and then I add that to the next bunch that I'm getting ready to shred up. And so that way you don't really waste your greens, but you don't have that bitter stem in it as well. Now, one thing about cooking collard greens, the hardest part is this part right here, shredding the collard greens. The cooking part of it goes pretty fast, especially at this time of the year, because you want the frost, if you can, to have already touched the collard green leaves, because the frost makes the collard greens cook faster, and the frost also makes the collard greens sweeter. So you don't have to add much of any sugar to it when you get it after the frost is hit. Yeah, my mom just would cringe if she saw me throw these away and not use them, because when she was growing up, you didn't waste anything. So you figured out how to use those collard green leaves. And some people cut the stem out before they even do this, but I think it's quicker to do it this way instead of cutting the stem out. So my mom grew up on a farm, and they basically grew all of their produce, and she was the youngest one of all the kids, and so she was given the task of cooking the food while everybody else was out harvesting the produce. And so even at a very, very young age, she had to learn how to cook. Now, as you've seen before, I was cutting the greens, and now I have them all shredded up. As you can see what it looks like here, but you don't want to eat them like this. You want to make sure you wash them. I don't know whether you could tell when I was cutting them, but it does have a sand in it because they are grown out in the dirt. So you want to make sure that you wash them very well. If you don't, you'll have what we call a hot mess on your hand, okay? And nobody wants to eat collard greens that are gritty. You don't want to wash your greens just once. You want to wash it several times so that you make sure that you get them very clean. They're clean of any kind of dirt. Now, at certain times of the year, you have to be really careful when you harvest collard greens, because they'll get lice on them. And lice is a little bug that loves the taste of greens too. And so they migrate to the collard greens to eat them. And if you notice that you have lice on the collard greens, it's best to just not use those, because you don't want to risk eating bugs. I don't think you do. I don't want to risk eating bugs. So most people want to steer away from the ones once they have lice on them. And as you can see, I'm starting to shake it. The water is getting more quantity of it in the sink. So I can go ahead and get some of any dirt that's left on those greens off. And the other value of going ahead and cutting the greens up small is that it makes it easier to wash the greens. You'll get all of that dirt off of it. And another little tidbit is that if you don't have time to really work with your greens and wash them, you can put them in water and put a little bit of salt, a baking soda in the water, and just let them set for a couple of hours, and that'll pull that dirt off of that. So if you're not in a hurry, that's another way that you can get the greens clean. Now, there's a reason why you shake the excess water off. Collard greens have a lot of water in the greens itself, and if you leave a lot of water on the greens, then you're going to have a lot of water to pour off of the greens when you get ready to cook them. And rule of thumb is I like to wash them at least 3 times. But it all depends on if I feel sand at all in my water after I finish washing, then I will continue to wash my greens until I feel no more grittiness or sand in the water. Okay, now, if you notice, I've got a big pot right here. But this pot is only big to be able to accommodate the greens that are going inside the pot. Once the greens are in the pot, they're going to shrink down considerably. And I can end up using a smaller pot to actually finish cooking them in. Okay, and as you can see, I'm starting to rinse and get all the excess water off the greens. And I'm going to show you in a minute how many collard greens I have in this pot. And as I'm pulling my collard greens out, I don't feel any grittiness. That's a good sign. You don't want to have that sand in your collard greens. And as you can see, I've got a pretty large pot of collard greens here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this over here to the stove. Okay, so now I've finished rinsing, cleaning my collard greens, and as I've demonstrated, I've got a big pot of collard greens. You want to go ahead and turn them on. Now, if you notice, I didn't add any water to that pot because you really don't need to have any added water. Collard greens make a lot of their own water, and sometimes you actually have to end up draining some of the water off of it. You have so much water. So I'm going to go ahead and put the lid on. I got it on a medium heat. And those can go ahead and get started. Now, one of the other things that I'm going to add to my collard greens is baking powder. And you probably wonder, why do you put baking powder? It's not a cake or something of that nature. Why are you adding baking powder to collard greens? But collard greens are green in color. If you don't add baking powder to it, they turn almost a brownish looking color, and it doesn't have that rich color in it that it has now. So I just take a pinch, and you know, when we in the South say we take a pinch of something, we really mean a pinch, okay? You don't have to put much at all in there. I get that, put it in there, and I'm going to stir that up. Now, one thing that I did not do is I did not add any salt to my greens. And the reason why is because I'm going to put seasoning meat in my greens. And sometimes the seasoning meat has enough salt in it that you don't have to add any additional salt. It's enough to season your greens with just the salt that's in the seasoning meat. And I have my seasoning meat going over here. Let me grab a pot holder right here. And I didn't go the healthy route with this because I thought you all would really want to see what real southern greens taste like. So what I'm cooking over here is some smoked neck bones. Now, if you want to do this healthier, what you can do is you can use smoked turkey legs or smoked turkey wings, but I just love the flavor of smoked neck bones, so that's the reason why I use those, okay? Also, again, you want to boil any kind of meat like that you have. Boil it, cover it with water, and boil all the excess water out of it. And then at that point, you can go ahead and add oil and fry it in that. And then I use that oil and the meat to season my greens. And I'm not going to open my pot because if you keep opening your pot, they're not going to steam like they're supposed to. So while my greens are cooking, I then take the time to cook rice. And I like to use any type of long grain rice. I typically use jasmine rice because it's got a really good flavor to it. But when I cook rice, I go ahead and I put the rice in the pot and I wash the rice. You want to get excess starch off the rice, so you go ahead and you wash the rice. And then after you wash the rice, you want to put about a tablespoon of oil in there. And the reason why you put the oil is because the rice won't stick to each piece. And you also want to put a little salt in there so that you don't have a bland tasting rice. And what I do is I'll turn the pot that I have the rice on so that it's not covered, and I let it boil hard until all the water boils out of the pot. And then I put the lid on the pot, turn it down to the lowest setting, and I let that cook for about 20 minutes. And when you do that, I'll show you what you end up with. I did cook my rice earlier, okay, because I didn't want to take too much time with this. This is the collard green segment, not a rice segment, okay? But if you notice, if you do that, you end up with nice fluffy rice. It doesn't stick together, and you're going to realize how yummy this is when you eat collard greens on top of it. If y'all saw that meat is starting to pop. When that meat starts to pop, that tells us that it's ready to go on top of these greens, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my pot, and I'm going to get this meat and oil. And you hear that? That sizzles. I'm going to get all of that and pour that on top of my greens. And I'm going to stir that up. And you remember I showed you how much greens was in the pot? Well, I'm going to take this off the stove for a minute just to show you what it's reduced down to. That is all that you're going to end up with these greens. It's reduced down to this much because, and if you can see, there's liquid in here. That's the water that came out of the greens. So even though the pot was full of greens, it's reduced down to that little bit of greens just from that small amount of time that it's been cooking. When they're done, what I do is I taste 1 or 2 greens out of the pot, and if it tastes like it has enough salt in it, I don't add anything. But if it tastes like it's bland and it needs a little salt, I'll go ahead and add a little bit of iodized salt to it. And if it's still got a little bit of a bitter tang to it, I'll go ahead and add a pinch of sugar. So that's the reason for me having the sugar out, in case I need it. Okay, well, I think that they're done. I'm going to taste them for seasoning, and we're going to sit down and enjoy some in a moment. The way I serve these is that I put them on top of rice. And I know you said that you were not accustomed to eating them on rice.
Yeah, well, and I love rice and I like collard, so I'm sure it's going to be way better. But yeah, my family's always had it, just the collards, just on a plate.
Right.
No rice under it. So.
Well, that's how a lot of people eat them, but the southern way that I've been taught to eat is have them on top of rice.
Well, I think you're probably going to convert me. I'm ready to try this. I'm going to try it before I put that on, and then I'm probably going to put a lot of that on. That sounds really good.
Okay. Right. Well, let's dig in.
Alrighty.
Okay.
You're right. That really doesn't need anything. That's so good.
And it's very tasty.
I'd like it on the rice.
And you notice how tender the greens are. They're not tough at all.
And I had no idea that you didn't have to put water in there. How much water just comes directly out of them. It's really interesting. Well, thank you so much again for having us today. Thank you to our viewers. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Please come back and see us again at Cooking from the Heart in Augusta. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you again to our sponsor, Northwestern Mutual Eaves Financial Group.